Good afternoon. How are you? As president of Florida Realtors, I'm happy to be here to speak on behalf of our 238,000 members and small businesses. If you're a member of Florida Realtors in the room, can you stand up and be recognized, please? Our Realtor members understand the value of collaboration and international partnerships. This year marks the 13th edition, lucky 13, of the World Strategic Forum. Florida Realtors is honored to be part of this tradition of collaborative intelligence gathering and thoughtful leadership. The past few years have shown all of us that now more than ever, our economies and our business and the residential market are intertwined. In 2023, Florida's real estate, finance, and insurance industries was the top contributor to the state's GDP. Real estate drives Florida's economy, and the Sunshine State continues to be both a popular draw, both domestically and internationally. Global business and real estate investment are keys to our Florida's future. One of Florida Realtor goals is to strengthen the voice of the real estate across the globe, which we believe is an integral part of Florida's future and moving Florida forward. We continually seek to establish strong relationships with leading real estate organizations in countries like Canada, Spain, Ireland, Turkey, France, Dubai, Germany, Brazil, Mexico, Thailand, and so many more. We reach out to them all the time to let them know we are their international partner. Participating in leading edge events like the Miami World Strategic Forum enables Florida Realtors and our members to learn from the experts and use that knowledge for growth and development, both personally and professionally, in business and on the global scale. Working together to share information through a global platform, as we do here at the World Strategic Forum, helps to deepen our mutual understanding, strengthen our connections, and develop innovative ideas for our coming years. Our speakers today have a wealth of knowledge to share when it comes to South Florida and the unique real estate investment and business opportunities that we have available in our wonderful Sunshine State. Not only is South Florida an international destination, often referred to as the gateway to Latin America, but entrepreneurs, business executives, and other local leaders continue their efforts to enhance South Florida's well-deserved reputation as a standout for tourism and hospitality experiences. Let's be honest, people come to Florida because of our beautiful beaches and our weather. Wouldn't you agree? Are you all ready for your next panel? Yes? All right. We are fortunate to have as our moderator today, Rich Roffman. He's the publisher for Global Miami Magazine and has the nationally syndicated radio show Made in America. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Rich, and your amazing panelists.
Thank you so much. Hey, how are you? Come on, wake up. Everyone good? All right, that's important. You gotta be awake. This is good stuff. What we're going to talk about is actually one of the unique things about South Florida and specifically Miami, but absolutely changed, and now it's all of South Florida as a region. The things that make us so successful. You know, one of the things that people take for granted is that we're successful and that we are the way we are because this is the way we've been, but it really didn't exactly happen that way. And when you go into other cities, like I've spent with Latin Trade Magazine and Latin CEO and Global Miami and all these other stuffs. I've been in other major cities and to a T almost, the mayors talk about Miami in South Florida. Why is it we have all this multiculturalism, all this growth, all these different people, all these different languages, all these different foods? How did that happen? So when I speak to like the mayor of Houston a number of years ago with my partner, JP Faber, whom I love as my kid brother, where's JP? He's not here. There she is. All right. So We actually sat with the mayor, and then I'm going to get right onto the topic. And the mayor of Houston said, how is it you can get all these things happening from Southern Cone, Latin America, in Miami, and here we are, you can literally walk from Mexico. He says, everyone knows we have Tex-Mex, we have Mexico here, but we can't get Argentina, we can't get Chile, we can't get Peru, we can't get all these other countries, and they were really in play in the early 90s. Which is going to go back to American Airlines, because Americans was very much a part of that incredible growth that we had at that time. And so we had to write a white paper for the mayor of Houston explaining why we have what we have, because we had actually, in South Florida, we had a 21st century city and region that the other guys back in the 90s were trying to figure out and scratching their heads, how did you do that? How did you do that? And we had been doing that at that point for well over a decade, because we had a vision and we moved forward. All right. This is going to be a fun panel. This is going to be really, really good. We're going to be talking about the things that make us successful. Tourism is way on top. But one of the things that we're going to bifurcate and talk to the panel about is the different types of tourism. One of the things that Bill Johnson knows really well, my buddy Bill, port director, head of the commerce. I mean, Bill is, you want to get something done, you call Bill Johnson. That's the bottom line. Okay, so here's the deal. We had two types of travelers that developed in the 80s, and we're going to talk about it. The corporate hybrid traveler, which really reflected the growth that we were getting in the Miami market and the South Florida market. And then you had the personal traveler, the person who was here because this is what they do. This is where they came. This is where my family came once or twice a year when I was a kid in the 50s to warm up, because we were from New York City, and being Jewish, anything under 70 degrees, we get very cold. And we go right to Liberty Travel and buy our tickets. Okay, on the panel today, this is going to be great. Juan Carlos Liscano, Vice President, Miami Hub, American Airlines. We have Guillermo Santa Cruz, who's the president of Homestead-Miami Speedway. I am really excited about that. Anthony Cordo, the executive vice president of Visit Lauderdale. And I got to tell you, being a Broward County kid for all my years, man, has Lauderdale changed? And this guy's going to tell us all about it. David Whitaker, I've known for a long, long time. If you want to know tourism right here in our market, David's a guy to talk to. You should talk to him after this conference and find out what's going on, because he's at the crest and right at that wave of things that are happening. So let me throw this out to our panel for a second, and then I'll start with one of our members. One of my favorite movies over the years is North by Northwest. Anybody remember that movie? Raise your hand. I want to hear. I want to see it. Raise your hand. All right, North by Northwest, 1958. Cary Grant, Eve Marie Saint. I don't have to say anything more than that. So in that movie, Eve Marie Saint happens to be a spy for the CIA. She's very advanced for the 1950s, by the way. So she winds up sleeping with, Cary Grant, which I presume a lot of women here would like to sleep with Cary Grant back in those days. But so he looks at her and he says to her, how did a girl like you, and I say that because it's 1958, I'm very sensitive. How does a girl like you get to be a girl like you? So I'm going to ask the panel, how did South Florida get to be the way they are from what they were? How did they go with that? David, let's start with you.
Well, thank you again. Thank you. And thank you for being here. And I always do this in any event I'm at. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you are visiting us from outside of South Florida? Welcome. Welcome. We're thrilled you're here. We're in charge of the weather in South Florida. So, well, Rich, I think, it's obviously a interesting question, and there's 80 different answers, really. I mean, so I'm struggling to find the one answer I want to share. What we know. So I always talk about destination marketing as a consumer brand. And by the way, American Airlines is a consumer brand. Homestead Speedway that purchase a ticket. And so tourism promotion is about consumer marketing. And a consumer brand has to continue to reinvent itself. Look at all the great brands in this country, in this world, that have died, that once were great brands, whether it's Sears, Roebuck, or, you name them. In fact, Eastern Airlines. If you're not relevant today, and if you're not constantly evolving as your consumer evolves, you're not going to be relevant, and you're going to lose market share, and then you're going to lose your business. And so successful destinations, and we're one of them, South Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, continue to evolve. And there's reasons for that. We're going to talk about that. But that's, I think, how do you get to be a girl like that? You got to keep reinventing yourself. Now, what helps is the things that have stimulated our destination. And you're going to, again, that's what this conversation is about. But all that stimulant, led by Latin America, by the way, in my heart, it never really would have happened. None of this would have happened if we hadn't become the gateway of Latin America. And that was the number one stimulus that drove everything else for the last 30, 40 years.
I'm gonna pause that right there. That's a great segue to American Airlines. This is JC. You know, one of the things that's remarkable, and I hope you understand this, and I want to be empirically clear about this. South Florida, and particularly Miami, owes a tremendous debt of gratitude to American Airlines. A tremendous debt of gratitude. Not only did they come here and develop the gateway for us, but they also contributed, did, enforced, related, marketed, did everything right in the community to help us become, I mean, everyone in this room who lives here is deriving benefit from JC's company. No question about it. You know, what I find astounding, and we were discussing our old friend Peter DeLara. Something happened when Eastern went down and Pan Am went down. It was 92 was a really rough year. We lost 2 major airlines. We lost 55,000 homes one night in August. I mean, it was a really scary year. But it's funny, out of Gestalt psychology, out of chaos comes order. American Airlines was making a decision whether they want to go with, you know, this is like the Matrix, the blue pill or the red pill. Well, they took the blue pill and they went into Latin America and they had the vision. Peter, can you talk about that? It was probably one of the best decisions that American made, and it was one of the best decisions that we had for South Florida to bring us to the point that David and everyone else could talk about. We're doing well because all these things occurred because of what your company did. You want to wax a little bit?
Yeah, look, good afternoon. JC Liscano. I promise you, I did not pay him for that introduction. I'm going to take you everywhere with me, so we can do that all over again.
That comes from the heart. That's not a paid advertising.
Yeah, no, not at all.
I believe this 100%. Bill Johnson, you 100% agree with that. Absolutely. Go ahead. Sorry.
You know, back in 1989, there was a group of local business leaders that kind of were a little bit clairvoyant. They understood. They were oracles, if you will. They saw what was happening, and they actually took the time to fly out to Dallas-Fort Worth, and they convinced American Airlines at that time to buy Eastern's routes. It was a transaction of about $471 million. In today's dollars, that's about $1.2 billion in today's dollars. And that's what we invested initially. You know, that was thinking, hey, you know, we think this community is going to be up and coming. We know the region is up and coming. You look at the GDP, you look at all the countries, we go, there's a ton of potential within the Caribbean and Latin America. And the deal was done. And we went back then from what was 19 flights a day and 200 employees. And Mr. DeLaura, kind of part of that deal, said, look, I think we'll get to 200 flights a day and maybe 10,000 employees. And his vision has far exceeded what he initially promised. And I think you'd be surprised to know that we're going to hit 415 flights a day this December. We have 14,500 team members that call Miami home. So we're the largest for-profit employer here in South Florida. And I think a stat I usually throw in, and Mr. DeLaura didn't expect this to be such incredible economic input to the community and to all of South Florida, because we have a lot of team members that don't just live in Miami-Dade, they live in Broward as well. But our salaries alone for Miami is $1.8 billion. So for a second, take the $28 billion of economic impact we bring to the region just from travel, tourism, trade, commerce, cargo. And then you add on all the other jobs that are created because we're running a major hub here. And you think about that input, you're like, wow, that's incredibly humbling. All on that vision of people 35 years ago.
What's interesting, what Mr. DeLaura, by the way, if you ever called Mr. DeLaura Peter, you're in big trouble. I just want you to know that. Mr. DeLaura once told us, along with his lieutenant, Bob Troney, who said, listen, let me tell you how Bob picks the planes. It's what's going in the cargo. You know, there was a change happening. We became a major cargo center. You know, a major cargo center. Your port grew dramatically. It exploded over all those years. Our airport, Billy, where airport's the number 1, 2, or 3 of anything in the country right now, isn't it? Yeah, it's just unbelievable. More international, more cargo. We have all these things happening in South Florida. And what's interesting also is that by having those routes, by making it convenient and seamless to fly. I mean, I was 29 years in Latin America, trust me. And I flew America. I flew American Airlines a long, long time. But we went to Santiago. I mean, one of my favorite places was Santiago. I don't understand how they went leftist. I'm stunned by that. But all right. But they did that. We went to Santiago, went to Argentina, went to every major country. And by bringing that in, by bringing these people up, not just for personal travel, that was happening and they did that. You could get here anywhere in the world, better into MIA, better out of MIA than any place else in the world to get into Latin America. But you go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in real quick, just tie it into David's comments as he was talking about like how Miami got to where it is today. You could almost follow a history book, if you will, and you follow the entire region. Every time there was economic success or an upcycle, that money came to Miami as investments. Every time there was a down cycle, people took their money and brought it over as investments. Every time there was a political upcycle, people got excited, or an election that maybe people weren't happy with. All of those, you can almost follow through the whole Americas, a wave of investment over investment. And as that happened, you started creating communities of Venezuelans and Colombians and Brazilians all throughout South Florida. And that became an anchor. So we used to talk about very, very nicely, very kind of loosely, Miami is the capital of the Americas. I want any of you to argue with me that it isn't in fact become the true capital of the Americas, a center for decision-making, a center for finance, a center for technology, not just tourism, trade, and commerce.
So let's go to Fort Lauderdale for a minute, and then I want to get into sports for a sec. Fort Lauderdale, having lived there for all those years with my kids, has really gone through a major change. They've experienced what we've experienced here. It grew and it's continuing to go dramatically. Why, who, what, where, when, and how is happening in Fort Lauderdale? And how is the Visit Lauderdale really reflecting all of that as David works very hard in Miami-Dade?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the development in the Broward County region has just exploded in the last few years. I've been here for about 7 years, and parts of town don't even look like they did just 7 years ago at this point. I make the joke about this one district just outside of downtown, Flagler Village. When I moved in 7 years ago, if I'd bought one of these little warehouses over there for $5, nobody wanted to even go in there. It was dangerous. I'd be a billionaire now because they're putting in these huge towers all over the place. And that's a lot of areas of the community. But when you talk about how we got where we are, there's probably two factors you can really boil all this down to. One is our geography. We are one of the few areas of the United States of America that are consistently warm and temperate. People want to be here. It's a nice place. We do not have 7 feet of snow on our doorstep right now. And you know, yes, we have some natural disasters every once in a while that we don't talk about. But they are very frequent, knock on wood. So, it is a good place to be, you know, and once air conditioning was invented in the 40s, 50s, that's when you could see the population in the industry really starting to boom down here, when you start to see people moving in here. But that kind of leads into that second factor of what makes our area of town great, or our area of the country so great, is the shoulders of giants, right? It's all of the people who really invested in the various parts of civilization that makes this such a great place. We talk about tourism all the time. We've talked about airlift. I mean, but it goes so much deeper than that. You know, there's 2.5 million people living in Broward County right now. They each have a part to play, and each one of their ancestors, for those that grew up here, had a part to play to make it what it is today. I sat at a table the other day here. It was actually Saturday at a gala. The guy at the table with me, one of them, he worked for the sewage department for Broward County. And I mean, talk about kind of an important institution for all of us, right? It's these people all over town in so many different little walks of life that really build us into what makes us great. It's the transportation networks that have been built here over the years, our amazing port system, both of our ports, our airport system, it's our school system, it's the banking institutions. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on, and you can't have a great place without all of these parts working together. But when you try to think of how can I replicate that somewhere else, you have to start to take off bite-sized chunks. You can't just talk about the millions of different facets of your civilization that make it a great place. So that's when we start to get into each of our areas that are important to us. You know, for us, tourism, I mean, that boomed down here because of the geography and because of the cultures and the great food and the wanting to escape those snowy days. And because aircraft were invented and then developed and commercialized. And so it's a complicated story to talk about what made us so great. But that's one of the coolest parts of it, you know, is that no matter which angle you come in from, there are millions of stories that got us where we are today. And I bet a lot of you in this room who grew up in this area and who had parents that lived in this area and grandparents, you probably have some interesting stories where they can tell you, hey, I built that. I did this. I got us here where we are today. And all together, that's what makes us a unique community, that diversity and that huge number of people that just wanted to invest and make this a place.
Thank you for that. So what we're learning is that over the years, we brought in various groups. You know, if you think about why would somebody, I don't want to go now, why would somebody go to New York City in the day? And they would go to New York City because it was multicultural. I mean, I grew up in New York City in a place called Gramercy Park. I don't know if you know where that is. But I'm an East Side kid, Lower East Side, street kid, as opposed to my partner who was Upper Left Side, you know, Museum of Natural History. He's a Zabar guy. I'm a D'Agostino guy. Big difference. Christides. But here's the thing. You go to New York in the day because you had the Statue of Liberty. You go to New York because you have the United Nations. You go to New York because you have Little Italy. You go to New York because you have Chinatown. You go to New York and you have Germantown on the Upper East Side, on the 70s and so forth. Because you have all these different things that you can experience. And then, of course, you have the history, the legacy, and all the things that were really cool about New York growing up that we learned about when we were there. The arts, the museums, all this stuff. That's why people would come, and that's why they did so well with tourism.
I want to welcome you to the New York Economic Forum, everyone.
So, no. There's a reason for that. And the reason, here it is. Thank you for that, David. But the reason is we have developed things and institutions in South Florida that mirror that, which I find very intriguing. And we're going to get to the Speedway right now and talk about it. One of the conditions to become a global city is that you have to have a number of verticals, whether it's education, healthcare, you know, a strong banking system, finance, legal, logistics, and 2 economic engines, a port and an airport. And we have that both here and we have it up in Fort Lauderdale. And that brings people, and you also have to have sports. That's one of the requisites to be a global class city. We had baseball. I actually worked for Wayne Huizenga when I was at Blockbuster, and I helped him, and I helped Smiley develop. I wrote the speeches for those guys when they were going out trying to get the license. We got that. We have a hockey team. We have one of the killer basketball teams, which is unbelievable. We have really grown. We have NASCAR. NASCAR is one of the coolest sports. It attracts gazillions of people. And if you've never been to it, you really got to go because it's the most exciting place that you could be because it's, you feel the excitement and you smell it in the whole thing. Let's talk about the Speedway. I think that's one of the most remarkable things that we have in South Florida. Tell us about what's going on down there and how it fits into everything we're talking about.
Sure. Well, first, thank you. And thank you all for being here. Just to also, before I answer that, to build a little bit on what was said before, you're 100% right. This is the capital of Latin America, and it's incredible how people in Latin America don't question it. You can be anywhere in Latin America and you say it, and they will never, ever question it. The other thing about geography, it's not only our temperate climate, it's the fact that we're so isolated from everything else. We don't get media from other states. We don't get traffic from other people driving through the way that Atlanta does. We are a very unique ecosystem that is not, we're like the Galapagos Islands, which I'm sure your American can get you there. We're just isolated from everything else. And I think that makes a big difference. And to talk about the Speedway, if you're not familiar with it, Homestead-Miami Speedway is really an iconic location here in South Florida with a very unique place in the sports landscape because it was born after and in the aftermath of Hurricane Andrew. So when Hurricane Andrew decimated Homestead in 1992, a group of people led by the incredible Ralph Sanchez, came to Homestead and built this incredible track that we eventually associated with NASCAR. And we ran a playoff race a couple of weeks ago. We will have NASCAR again in March of next year. But it is really a unique location in that hosts the most popular motorsport in America. You know, sometimes people wonder about that and they think other motorsports are more popular in the U.S. Absolutely not. NASCAR is the most popular motorsport in the U.S. And it is something that is not only very American, it's very Florida. You know, it began in Daytona. You all know about the Daytona 500 and Daytona International Speedway. It is authentic to Florida. It's American racing. It is hardcore. It is loud. It is fast. It is exciting. It is an all-sensory experience because you got to hear the roar of the engines. You got to feel the speed. You got to smell the fuel, smell the tires. And believe me, you smell it. And then I always say, well, it's the fifth sense is taste, and we offer great food. So, you know, you're not going to drink the gas, but we have great food for you. So It is very emblematic of South Florida. It is emblematic of Florida itself. It is not something that was imported from someplace else. It is something that is iconic and true to this region, very much so. It is a sport that, as many of you know, it began with the bootleggers during the prohibition. Exactly, all the rum runners and all that. So from those roots, that's where NASCAR began. And today we have this incredible facility. It's a 21st century sport. Next year we're also going to host Formula E. So we're gonna have the electric cars there. So we are evolving. We are changing with the times. But one thing that never ever changes, you know, if you ain't first, you're last.
Well, that's exciting. I'm just curious, when you sell out, how big is selling out? I mean, it's a huge place.
So in our grandstand is 38,000. There's probably another 20,000 in the suites and things like that. When it sells out, you know, we're not at the same level at Daytona. They have their grandstand is 103,000. But between all the people in the infield, the campers who come out there, it's a big number. There's something for everyone. And one thing that I found very interesting, and by the way, I've been there all of 5 months. I should caveat all this by saying that I got there in July of last year, just, you know.
Where were you from originally?
So me personally, where I was working before.
Yeah.
So I was working at IMG, the International Sports Agency. I looked after all their business in Latin America.
What city are they in?
I'm sorry?
Down here.
Down here, yes. I was just up the road in Coral Gables.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right here. I was in
There you go.
Alhambra and
Yay for
Pond.
that.
So now I drive all the way to Homestead every single day. So I looked after that business in Latin America. So logged in plenty of miles on American. And, you know, having that background, having worked in sports really my entire life, because my background is in media. I worked at Univision. I worked at Telemundo. I produced Olympics. I produced FIFA World Cup.
That just proved the point. All those folks moved here and proliferated back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s and grew dramatically. Telefonica started like this on Brickell Avenue because I worked with him with Latin Trade Magazine, and then it became this. So let's talk about this for a second, and this is going to affect, I want Americans' comment after David and Anthony. My point was that we have a lot to offer in South Florida and many things now that we didn't have many years ago. I'm going to say Art Week, just for an example. If you want to know why there was so much traffic in the last week, it's because it was Art Week, and it was packed. I mean, it was absolutely packed. David and Anthony, how have things changed, and what are we offering, which is great? You know, when Gary Nader comes to mind, and another old friend of mine, we've changed a lot, and we have so much to offer right now. David?
Well, I'm going to try to figure out what your question was.
Oh, the question is, how are we marketing, and what's the excitement behind that, and how has it changed for you? That's the question. You're not getting lunch next week. I want you to know that. You're not going to get lunch. No mayonnaise for you. Just want you to know that.
Well, again, kind of sticking on the premise of consumer behavior, consumer brands, destination marketing. One of the other things that has happened, and it's simply supply and demand. When you have some of the highest occupancies in the country, what a surprise, you can charge more for that room. New York has the highest average daily rate in the country. We are tied for fourth, by the way, with San Francisco and Las Vegas and San Diego. So we're right in there. So this is not an inexpensive destination. But if we want to fill all, and by the way, you could fill every hotel in Miami and Broward County if you sold the rooms for $55 a night. But that's not what the economic engine is all about. So one of the core strategies is what you've all been talking about, what you've been laying the foundation for. As we've evolved, become a much more sophisticated, you know, sports tickets to a Dolphins game, a Heat game, they're not inexpensive tickets. You know, eating at and we have 17 Michelin-starred restaurants now, and eating at one of these restaurants is not an inexpensive evening. And we have some of the finest, most beautiful hotels, both Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and they're not inexpensive hotels. So if we're going to fill the volume we need, we're going to have to attract a consumer who is the same spending, and they're here not because they can afford to be here, they're here because they want to be here. And they're here because it meets their lifestyle. And so over the decades, what you've seen is the destinations evolve, where whether you're into great sports events, great music events, high-end entertainment, golf, Art and culture. Look at this last week. You talked about Art Week. Art Basel, Switzerland, which brought their show here 21 years ago. Now there's 20 different art fairs that week, and the town is sold out. And the room rates are $2,000 a night. But the town is sold out because people want to be here because of the art, rubbing elbows with other art lovers, the deals that get done while they're here. So the ecosystem has evolved, whether it's art, music, international finance, cryptocurrency. As the ecosystem evolves, the consumer evolves. And that's to asking you how this all happened, it just feeds off of itself.
I do want to chime in real quick. Sorry, this does not happen on its own. So there's a lot of hard work that happens with intentionality. And now I'm going to sound like I'm a walking commercial for, visiting bureaus here for Lauderdale and Miami. But it was the work of Rolando and that table and David that brought the Michelin Guide. When you bring the Michelin Guide and you start rating restaurants, that brings a lot of publicity you didn't otherwise think. When you get behind host committees to bring the World Cup, to bring Super Bowls, that attracts, that brings notoriety. But that takes effort, intentionality, collaboration between communities, tri-cities, tri-communities. And so I just wanted to highlight that it's a lot more than just great. I mean, you have to go chase it as well, because there's other cities that are trying to do the same thing.
And I think you're hitting on both of you on something that's actually kind of makes us stand out. There's only a few places around this planet where businesses are willing to invest to make themselves nice enough to attract the luxury guests we're now commanding. When you're talking about those, room rates of $2,000, you can't have a guest come in there and stay at a $2,000 hotel and expect is Howard Johnson still in business? I don't want to make fun of Hojos if it is. Go for it. Anyway, you can't expect like a Hojo experience or like a low quality motel experience. It's got to be a luxury experience. And that's a rare place in this world, a hotel that wants to invest to create that experience. The same even with restaurants. I mean, it's expensive to run a business. We all know that, especially in hospitality. So seeing that these guests are willing to come here creates an upward cycle for us that we're all still on, where you see this investment then that goes back into the product to make sure that it matches the demands of those visitors that are coming here. And that helps the quality of living for the residents. I mean, you talk about 17 Michelin star, right? 17. I don't think those would exist without the visitor, right? Because the visitor has to spend enough money here to support the existence of a lot of those restaurants. But then the residents get to enjoy that too, which then means you're attracting a higher quality resident, which then means you can in turn get a higher quality of business to come here and set up shop because they're looking for those employees. And it's just this cool spiral that's starting up that hospitality really is at the center of, I think, to create that quality of living experience. And I love it. It's cool.
It permeates everything because it goes beyond that. What people associate with South Florida, it is a high-end experience. We're not catering to people who are so much price sensitive as they are experience sensitive. Everything has to be elevated. Everything has to, even when they're not paying $2,000, they expect the $2,000 because that's what they associate with Miami. That's what they see on TV. That's what they see in the media. And they come here and everything has to be that elevated experience. We at the track, struggle a little bit with that because we don't charge what some of the other events do. We are a different sort of event where, for example, people can come in and they can still bring their own food, their own coolers with beer and things like that. Our experience is a little bit different, but we struggle with that because we know the South Florida experience tends to be elevated. So one of the challenges that we have is when people come from out of Miami, they come to the tracks, they expect something that is elevated or they expect something that's very Latin because it's Miami. And then the people from Miami who come to the track expect something very American because it's NASCAR or something very grassroots. So that whole ecosystem, there's a little bit of something for everyone, but everything is very experience sensitive in South Florida. People always expect the best.
Just to double on that too, Port Everglades is in the room too as well. So we've got both port powerhouses in here. And, it's interesting. They do a great job of catering to a bunch of different, socioeconomic levels, right? We've got the really high end cruise lines that, some of the people in this room, but most of us can't afford to go on probably. But then you also have things that you could afford to go on. I mean, this weekend I'm heading out on a booze cruise and I can afford that. So I'm happy. But it's got those different levels of affordability. But when we talk about challenges, that luxury experience does create a whole new level of challenge for us, whether it's affordability of living here or affordability to come here and whether or not you're putting all your eggs in one basket of one type of visitor.
No, I mean,
Yeah, I was
JT?
gonna close it at least from my end, loop it in and say, because I think the way you started the proposition is it is not just about a beach and a tourist destination. It was a very intentional effort to bring New World Symphony, to bring the Art Center, to bring other venues, to bring Art Basel, to bring these events that start happening year round that become much more attractive than simply just a beach destination. I think that has been a key component of the success. So you look for sophistication. And the best way I can give you an illusion is think about an airplane, hopefully an American Airlines airplane. But if you think about that tube, it's an aluminum tube, right? It has 180 seats in it, but it's got first class, business, main cabin, coach, and then basic economy. You break that out to the different constituencies, everybody that there's the same airplane going to the same destination, but appealing to different customer bases. And Miami and South Florida are really doing just that, appealing to all customer bases really to come visit. And
I'm going to steal that.
And the
I'm gonna
traffic,
use that line.
you can use that. The traffic is there, so they're coming.
Let me get off the. I want to take what you said and I want to move it to a different level just for a second. And I market global Miami and Latin trade, and I mean I've done all these things for about 40 years. Miami and South Florida. Miami is the brand in Latin America to a degree. Doesn't mean it's not South Florida. It is absolutely 100%. It's sexy. It's sexy. There's something energetic about Miami. You have to think about that. If you ever saw the movie Miami Rhapsody, you understand that this is a really exciting, dangerous, wonderful, colorful, tantalizing place to be, and people want to come here. We are a branded area in Switzerland as much as we are anywhere else. We are a known city.
I'll tell you an anecdote real quick. I was in Russia for World Cup 2018 with a bunch of people from, other parts of the world, other parts of the U.S. And whenever we were in a circle of people and somebody from Russia asked where we were from, you could say New York, you could say London, you could say Los Angeles. Nothing. Where are you from? Miami. Miami? I love Miami. Have you ever been? No.
But I have an uncle that has a condo in Miami, South Florida, and they all do.
It was an immediate reaction, and so many times it just changed the whole tone of the service that we got and everything else, because there was, as you say, there is that brand that is Miami that is so unique and so well defined, and for the attributes that you so well listed out, it was conscious. It's been done a certain way, and it's worked. It's very consistent.
Okay, I want to get back to American for a second. So we just did Art Week. There are a number of things that occur in Miami. And how's that been affecting you? Your numbers must have jumped dramatically last week. Are there certain times that you're just absolutely booked? I mean, sometimes I call and I got to go somewhere and I can't get it unless I call somebody. But how does that relate to you? How are you doing with that?
It's for me, it's always a great question kind of process. It changes depending on the time of year. But Sunday, we move 99,000 customers. Which is just give that some perspective. And so at this time of year, we run about 70% market share. And it was a 97% load factor. That means that 97% of the seats that came into Miami and came out of and left Miami were with a customer on board. And so that's pretty incredible to do. But what drives the success, right? If you think of a schedule like American's, 400 plus flights, it's 155 destinations, 85 of which we're the only ones that go there direct, right? The success of that is the ability to have a hub carrier here. Because the hub carrier, what it does for me is, look, we're super excited. We have a flight to La Romana, started last week. It's amazing, right? But what, you must be Dominican? Yes, okay. So, there's enough people that live in Miami to maybe fill half of that airplane. But I have the ability to bring 5 from the Northeast, 5 from the Midwest, 5 from the Southeast, 5 from the West Coast. And now I can make that flight economically viable. And so it's a self-fulfilling model, if you will, that allows me to then go to these destinations that are direct out of Miami. And air connectivity is one of the top 3 reasons why a company chooses to move their offices here.
There's no question. I mean, if you think about it, and we're going to get back to both counties right now, and including Palm Beach. Let's not leave them out. But we have, the word is connectivity. Now, it's interesting. We didn't talk much about the cruise lines, and I'd like to talk a little bit because they've come back dramatically since COVID, and Bill, you'd agreed on that, and I'm sure the folks at Port Everglades. That's a major component for Fort Lauderdale and Broward County. It's a super component for Miami-Dade County. It's one of the largest economic generators that we have. If you had Heidi here or Ellen coming in from Port Everglades to talk about the stats from there, it's a very significant economic development arm for our counties, which really affects your Speedway because it brings all these people here, and it affects your airline, and the airlines do well with that because how do you think these people get here? They're going to fly in. They're going to fly in on major airlines, hopefully American, and they're going to, spend their money and do their thing and generate. So I'd like to talk for a second. First, I want to go to Broward for a second, Fort Lauderdale. You have, because I lived on the port for 26 years, you have major ships. It's a major economic generator. You want to know, where is it going in Fort Lauderdale? Because I know your stats are looking really good.
Up. It's interesting.
There it
Port
is.
Everglades has been working really hard on improving the experience you have at the port, and then it's kind of turning into higher end cruise ships there. We're no longer the dirt cheap economy cruise lines coming out of Port Everglades. Haven't been for a while, quite frankly. But just the load factors, or whatever you call that, people getting on the ships is just through the roof. I mean, I think we have 30-some vessels operating out of there this year. And you see it just starting to nonstop. And I live near the port, so I constantly hear the horns going off. But it's exciting. And, it really trickles in the economy in such a big way. We are in partnership with Port Everglades, expanding our convention center, building an 801-key Omni hotel and resort there attached to it. And part of that, selling point there is its proximity to the port. We can secure a hotel that large, that many more rooms easily because of the port being there, the development of more ships coming in constantly. And it's exciting to see that. It's kind of a point of pride in the community, too. When you talk to people around town, you don't have that. I grew up in the Midwest. We weren't proud of our port up there. I mean,
find a good port in Indiana.
Middle of Ohio. Yeah.
A little tough.
So it really trickles into so many different parts of our economy and in so many parts of just pride in our own community. But it's just booming, and it's really exciting to see that. And there's a couple people in the back room that should stand up and pat themselves in the back for that hard work from the port over there.
David, cruise capital of the world?
Well, two things. One is I couldn't agree more. I'll echo. I won't waste the time to echo because he's absolutely right. Secondly, JC made a comment about Mr. DeLaura. They care as much about what's in the belly of the plane as they do what's in the seats of the plane. And Miami is leading the nation in cargo, especially from, what a surprise, Latin America, Central South America, and the Caribbean. We are the cargo hub of the world. And that means a lot to the ports, economic-wise, and it also means a lot to the cruise lines. And the airlines, they transport as much cargo as they do passengers. And so that would be the only thing else that I would add. It's because of our juxtaposition. It's because of our intersection of the South. I joked once, well, it's not a joke. I actually was with a tour operator at a trade show, and he said, you know what I like about Miami? It's so close to the United States. And he said, and when you say the words Miami and South, and these words all mean the same thing, South Beach, Miami, South Florida, Hollywood, it means the energy, the excitement, the reputation. I love it when I travel around the world, and I travel all the time doing work, and you see a taxi driver, a store clerk, and they ask where you're from, you say Miami, and they go crazy, Miami. And then you say, and 3 out of 10, Miami, have you been? No, but I love it. I love it. And they haven't
feel good, by the way.
When great. They haven't even been here. But that's what a consumer brand strives to be. And those consumer marketing strategies that we all talk about, the economics of tourism, the storytelling of tourism is why we're sitting here on this stage today.
It's interesting. Miami has a tremendous history for aviation, by the way. We had one of the first passenger terminals. I wrote a piece on that in Global Miami. One of the first really designed terminals for aviation was right here in Miami. We had, back in the day, we had the Curtiss planes, and we had, Pan Am growing here with the aircraft that would, be on land on the water by, Dinner Key. Just an amazing history of tourism. Let me ask you guys a question. And I think we want to know that. The economic impact, You know, when I think about something like that, maybe Merritt Stearheim would say that. He said, well, the economic impact, according to the, you know, the Beacon Council, which he helped found in the 80s, is what? What do you think in terms of the tourism market and the cruising? What's the economic impact on that? Because that's a job creator. That's helping everybody across the board. You know, when we were trying to get the FTAA here back in the 90s, Jeb was pushing really hard to get the FTA, Free Trade Area of the Americas, get the Secretariat here. That would have been a pretty cool thing for us to have. Would have been great for finance and developing even more of the gateway to Latin America. But it really, the story was, the more people, the more tourism, the more excitement we had, it was agnostic. Everybody derives benefit from everything that you're talking about right now. Whether you're in a restaurant or a pizzeria, or you're an office supply place, or you own a Speedway and you're going to have this happening, or we have, you know, 110 incredible restaurants in Coral Gables alone. That's remarkable. In downtown Miami, in Fort Lauderdale, you have Class A, 5A restaurants, star restaurants, great hotels. What's the impact on this whole thing? It's got to be huge. Dave? Or no, Anthony, go ahead. You were ready to do it.
Yeah, I mean, like, we can throw out numbers all day long, and they're astronomical, unbelievable numbers because it just is so much money coming to this community. But to me, the economic impact is about, you know, the better school systems that we can afford because of the taxes paid by people coming here. It's the quality of living. It's all those restaurants that our residents can go to that are supported by the visitor, and it's that fact that your employees want to be here, and those random people you're talking about talk about how they want to be here. Yes, that's not a dollar amount, but that's really what the end result is that we're going for. And it's cool to see that. But I mean, that number for like economic impact, it's insane dollars.
David?
So I want you to remember the number 21 are the numbers 2 and 1. Roughly 21 million visitors. They spend the visitor spend is roughly $21 billion. So that's $1,000 for every tourist. And that seems right. You know, $400 for the hotel room, a couple $100 for, so, and they pay taxes that great point, by the way, you know, visitors spend sales, they pay sales tax. They pay hotel taxes. They pay taxes in the rooms for their room tax that generates money for art and culture, for education. Tourist dollars pay the salaries of our police. They say they pay the salaries of our teachers. Every resident of Miami-Dade County, if we had to keep the same level of service, we'd have to pay about $2,100 more a year in taxes to replicate the taxes that are generated by visitors. So we're all glad the visitor is paying those taxes, and it helps to drive this economy. So remember the numbers 2 and 1, and it kind of gets you to that story.
That's easy. That's great. We're going to finish with JC. Go ahead and tell us, how does that affect you? And you must pay a lot of tax. I mean, people buy a lot of products. You have 50-some-odd thousand people coming there. You're a big economic generator, particularly for South Dade.
Right. So, and that's the reason we exist, right? We came about, as I said earlier, you know, after Hurricane Andrew, to be an economic engine for South Florida, for the southern tip of South Florida, and particularly now that it's growing so much. If you haven't been out there, you know, I encourage you to not only come visit us, but to check out the direction in which South Florida is growing, because South Florida, you know, Miami itself can't go to the north anymore. We can't go west. We certainly can't go east. There's only one way to go, really, and that's south, and we're seeing it there. So one, we are an economic engine for Homestead and that southern tip of Dade County, but it's all additive, as you alluded to. So all those visitors, and I'll tell you a quick anecdote. Just, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I was driving up to the track one morning, and there's a car pulled up to our gate, and I see a lady there. You know, we have like a little speaker box, and I'm like, "Oh, can I help you?" And she's like, "Hi, we are from Germany. Can we go in and take some pictures at the track?" The track is not a tourist attraction. You know, we're not open for visitors. We don't have a ticket booth. We don't. And she's like, can we come in? We just want to take some pictures. I'm like, sure. I'm sure our risk management people wouldn't have been too happy about that. But I'm like, yeah, come on in. And she's like, well, I have kids. I'm like, well, it's okay, but everybody come in. So I took them in, showed them the track. They were here, you know, as I said, from Germany, and just randomly showed up. And we have events during the year. We actually have one weekend of NASCAR racing, but we have over 300 events of one sort of or another that take place at the track. And we see so many people from Latin America. We see so many people from Europe, who want to come and visit. So every plane load, every ship, every train, everything that comes into Miami and into South Florida brings potential fans to the track, and not only to the track, but obviously to every sporting event in South Florida. What we saw a couple of years ago with the World Baseball Classic was incredible. I mean, I was still at IMG. I sold the media rights to that event in Latin America, and I went to every game that took place here, and it was incredible. You've never seen that stadium rock the way that I did. So sports tourism, I mean, that could be a whole other panel. How many people come here now to watch Messi play? That was unthinkable.
Look what he did to the price of tickets. Really expensive.
The impact he had in the ecosystem of sports is just incredible. When he left Barcelona went to PSG, and then coming to Miami, the billions of dollars that follows that is just incredible. You know, I was at a meeting years ago with Argentinian broadcasters who were not exactly fans of Major League Soccer. They were not exactly saying the greatest things about Major League Soccer. Putting it down, basically, you know, the product and all that. Fast forward a couple of years, I was in Buenos Aires and see this huge billboard with Messi wearing his, you know, Inter Miami uniform. That would have been unthinkable. So there's all this movement that goes on because of sports. So there are people who come here to watch the Dolphins or to watch the Heat or to watch whoever.
That's great. I want to finish up a little bit with JC. American looks out. I would, if the folks that I met back in Dallas and the folks here, you're in for the long game. Well, so let's just take a minute or so. We have about a minute. Where do you see the future?
Well, before I get started, I am Juan Carlos from Colombia. So when I pull up to the gate, please let me go in.
You get the VIP.
I want the tour.
You get the VIP tour.
JC, I'm coming with you.
Okay, we're in. Look, we've doubled down on Miami, and we believed in Miami for the last 35 years. You don't make an investment like that, and then over the decades, continue to kind of invest, and you have to do that. And we did it, and we flew to markets and continue to fly to markets. We're celebrating so many anniversaries when it wasn't popular, when then we're in 10 different airlines doing it, when the economies weren't like booming then, and they are now. And so we played a small part in that. And it is a region that is going to continue to grow. And Miami will continue to accentuate being the capital of the Americas. Its influence over the region and the center of decision making will continue to grow. So our footprint will continue to grow. Next summer, we add direct service to Rome. Paris is year round. We're going to look at different possibilities. We're exploring the possibilities of maybe going to Asia. That is just a part of the equation.
That would be great.
And I think it's important to note, it isn't just for the people that live here. The success of MIA, Miami, Greater Miami, is we're also a connecting hub. It's only successful because half of the customers stay here, the other half continue on to that region we keep calling Caribbean and Latin America.
Very exciting. So, with the time left, I want to thank our panel, Juan Carlos Liscano, Guillermo Santa Cruz, Anthony Cordo, and David Whitaker. I want to thank you so much for your hospitality here and your graciousness. We thank you so much. See you next year.